My LaCroix, isn't it? Is it LaCroix or LaCroix? I still don't know.
No idea. I feel like even if it's LaCroix, saying LaCroix makes you, it's the salt of the earth.
If I say LaCroix, I feel like a prick.
Yeah.
So I hope it's LaCroix.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
I mean, I've only said LaCroix. So
You've only said LaCroix?
If it's
Yeah.
LaCroix, I feel embarrassed.
Okay, good. I might get away with it though because I'm Eurotrash. So
Yeah, right.
maybe it's okay for me to say it. It sounds cultured in my Irish accent. Nothing's more cultured than an Irish accent. All right, here we go. Hello friends and welcome to the Noclip podcast. It is episode 23 and I'm delighted to be joined by Yacht Club Games' own David D'Angelo. How you doing, my friend?
Good. Hello, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking time off the development of Shovel Knight. You're finished now, right?
We're finished. Well, sort of.
It's never finished.
It's never finished. I mean, I imagine I'll be making Shovel Knight to the day I die for sure. But yeah, right. It's done. Right. All we're doing is like a update with bug fixes, that kind of thing.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. It means a lot to finally be like, wow, it just never felt like it would ever be done. So
Yeah.
to be there is crazy.
It's awesome to have you here. It's a game that our patrons and community have been talking about us doing something on for a long time. And we're going to record some video stuff while you're here as well. So that should be a lot of fun. But while you're here, I kind of want to talk to you a bit about like just the whole journey as it's happened. Because I'm sure there are a lot of people who've played the game who have no idea sort of how long a story this is. And also there perhaps are people who haven't played it who have no idea and bounced out on it entirely. So you were with Yacht Club Games from the start, right? Like pre-Kickstarter, everything.
Pre-Kickstarter, there were 5 of us and Jake, who did the music, who wasn't officially part of the group because he freelances. But yeah, it was just I was one of the 5. Yep.
Where did you come from? Were you all at one other studio?
We all came from Way Forward, who you might know from Shantae or they do a lot of contract work for, I worked on a Thor DS game and Batman Brave and the Bold, right. And some guys worked on Contra 4, and I did a little bit on Boyna's Blob, and we did Blood Rain Betrayal, and the main group of us worked on Double Dragon Neon together.
Right. So that's down in LA as well, right? Or
it's just north of LA. Yeah.
Excellent. So what was the impetus? Was it that familiar story of we've worked at a studio long enough, we have a good sort of chemistry together, we have some ideas, let's go try something? Yeah,
it was that. And the interesting thing about Way Forward is they're pretty big and they're usually working on 4 or 5 projects at a time. And since they're a contract house, it's, we're making a Marvel comes and they want to make a game and they have to like get that team together just out of nowhere. Right.
They have to like build it, like build up.
Right.
And build
so
down.
what often happens is you never work with the same people twice.
Right.
And when we worked with the Double Dragon Neon team, we just clicked. We felt like if we made another game after Double Dragon Neon, it's going to be amazing.
Right.
And we said that we were asking Way Forward, can we make another game together? Like, can we somehow make this work where we can just keep our team? And the answer was no, because that's just not how they work, right? So
that seems like such a waste. Like you lose that institutional knowledge every cycle,
every single time. Yeah, it's like really hard to be like, wow, we find like we went through a year development process together, and just at the end we like know each other.
It's like we hear a lot from developers that the point at which you're the best at making your game is right at the end of making your game.
Definitely. Yeah. So that was really the impetus for, we want to make a game together. We should just make it happen. We should leave and just build something that we think we can make a great game out of.
So the story as I remember it, so I might be wrong, so feel free to tell me if I am, was that the game was sort of pitched, you had your Kickstarter, there were all these stretch goals of like, hey, look, if we hit this higher tier, then we'll make one of our, bosses playable. And if we hit this, and then you ended up hitting all of the tiers. Yeah. It's like $250,000, right?
Yeah, we got some 300 something thousand.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe $250,000 was the final stretch tier or something.
Yeah.
Did you expect? I mean, who expects it? But were you shocked by the reception? How did it happen? Was it the type of thing where you were just ticking all the boxes in terms of what people wanted, like a type of retro throwback game that people wanted?
We were very shocked. Our goal was $75,000. So,
Right.
I mean, we went 4+ times what we thought we would.
And $75,000 for a team of 4 and a contractor is like, modest.
It's definitely wasn't enough to make the game.
Right.
I mean, we knew that like if we got $75,000, we would probably have to come up with some other solution or make a much smaller game. But yeah, I mean, halfway through the Kickstarter, we had $50,000.
Right.
So we thought, oh, we're barely going to fund.
Right.
We'll be just over it a little bit, and then just like seemingly out of nowhere, we just exploded. It's just like enough people just. I just like that tipping point where
Right.
it just everyone knew about it all of a sudden, and no one knew about it the day before.
They give you that curve, right? Like if you fund a lot in the first 3 days, and then you tend to fund a lot in the final 3, and they can kind of plot you after a week where you're.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at I think we were definitely falling outside of the typical Kickstarter.
Right.
What happens? Like we could follow. I forget what the site is, but there's a site. It's like Kickstarter. So I don't know.
Like a third party.
But you can just look at every single Kickstarter and every single day and like track the graph and be like, oh well, we know exactly how much money we're going to make in the end because people always follow the same patterns, right? And we somehow broke out of that. And I think the main way we did it was we went to PAX. We went to PAX halfway through,
right? And
I think that had a big effect on just people seeing and enjoying the game. But one of the biggest things was at PAX, we met a lot of other developers that had done Kickstarters,
right.
And they all said, what made our Kickstarter explode is we went to YouTube. We said, we gave our demo to like a couple YouTubers,
right?
And this was like pretty early on. It was just like
it was like 2013 or something.
Yes, 2013. Yeah. So I mean, there weren't as many like established people on YouTube, but it was obviously popular.
You didn't have to pay them $50,000.
Yes, right. That was a big plus. So right after that, we sent it to Game Grumps, and we sent it to Two Best Friends, and we sent it, or Super Best Friends, and we sent it, just a bunch of people like that. And those videos just got millions of views.
Right.
And from there, it was like, holy crap, right? Almost with no, work from our end. So yeah, and then I think if we would have done that Kickstarter another week, we probably would have had $1 million.
Right.
Just because of how many people were seeing it, like in the back half of our Kickstarter.
That's incredible. Eyeballs are just so important.
Yes.
Especially for indie games when you don't have a marketing budget.
Yeah.
One that's really going to make that big difference.
Yeah.
Incredible. So I guess, you started to work on I guess Shovel Knight. It's had its like everything's sort of rejiggered now that the it's basically 5 games, I guess.
Yes. Now it's the Treasure Trove.
Yeah. So I guess that original game, like, how did you divvy up the work between all of you? Because you're listed as a programmer on Moby Games, but with a team that small, it's clear that everyone's wearing a bunch of different hats.
Yeah, so there were 5 of us. One person was doing concept art and illustration. One person did all the pixel art, Nick Wozniak, and Sean Velasco was the lead designer, and Ian Flood was the other programmer. And did I name 5 people?
And the music was from
the music was from Jake Kaufman. Right.
Which is just fantastic. I mean,
yes, Jake is a miracle worker for sure. Just the fact that he is an amazing composer and simultaneously like knows the technology of every system on the planet. It's like amazing just to be like, hey, we're gonna make a NES game. He's like, oh, good. I've like worked out the chip set that I wanted to use for an NES game if I ever made one, and I like know exactly the tool and everything to do it with. Yeah, so we generally everyone just had their hands in everything. So it was I would say like almost like a band where someone might lead another. It's like I'm writing this song, right? And everyone's contributing to that song, but there's like a lead person leading that charge. But there's some things just like, the writing of the game, we all got in the room and sweat every single line out together. Or there's a lot of components like that, or, Sean's the lead designer, but typically like if we're working on a boss, for example, it's like, hey, it's David, let's like talk through all the ideas. Let's like, and then I'll write it down. John will like go and like summarize it, and then we'll all like look at it and be like, is this what we want to do? So yeah, there's a lot of different ways we like divvied up those tasks, I guess.
Does that kind of, you worked in this game for the best part of a decade, I guess, like 7, 8 years. Does that help that you can kind of put on different hats so you're not doing the same exact task for like weeks on end?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'd be mind numbing if I definitely wouldn't want to be one of those people. I don't know, AAA company that's like working on the cloud rendering tech for 5 years straight in Red Dead Redemption or whatever. I mean, not to like make fun of those kind of, that's like a really cool thing to do too. But
good clouds.
I mean, it looks amazing. But yeah, I'm definitely the kind of person that's like, I want to keep doing interesting things I haven't seen before and trying to like learn new things, and that's part of it. And being able to have that a lot of variety, especially over making the game for 6 years. Yeah. It helps a lot.
So your core responsibilities, though, sort of traditionally were the like engine and a lot of the gameplay coding. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about the engine stuff first of all. One of the things that jumps out, and obviously for people who grew up playing Nintendo stuff, I didn't. I was a Commodore household, which makes me sound like super Euro trash.
If you're in Europe, you didn't get an NES, right?
Yeah, like the SNES was kind of the only.
That's like the first one. They didn't even localize the NES, right?
I know people who had them, but very few. And the SNES was the same sort of thing, and it was the type of thing like Ireland was very much an emerging economy in the late 80s and 90s. And the Commodore was a great computer to have because you could just copy discs. Yeah, right. So like, who was buying which is why Commodore isn't really around anymore. I think there's a shell company that has their names and makes PCs now or something. But like, yeah, they're effectively gone. But one of the things that jumps out to me as somebody who has gone back and played a lot of those games since is there are a lot of games that graphically look like those games. Shovel Knight like feels like one of those games, like the moving to a different screen and the enemies load in after. Like there's so much like what seems like technical sort of puppet strings going on behind the scenes that really actually make it feel like one of those games. Is that the case? Like, was there a lot of work in setting this foundation of a game that really doesn't just evoke what those games are like, but like actually kind of feels like you're tactilely playing one of them?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, a lot of those pieces are things you would do in games anyway. So like, for example, like the reference you gave where you're moving over a screen and the guys are spawning in, like you have to have some kind of system for spawning the enemies in. Otherwise, like all the enemies would exist all the time and the frame rate would be like 5 frames a second. And so it's sort of like just like taking the common systems you would have in a game and figuring out a way to just like slot them in the way that they would work in that era. And I think a lot of the techniques too were figuring out, it's like, well, how do we do that in a way that is like if you booted up an NES game now, typically it like doesn't look great, doesn't play that great. Like it was made for like an 80s television, right? So just figuring out like things like, oh, most TVs have input delay, so we should like buffer the player's input to like make it a little nicer when they're playing, right? Whereas like an 80s television like did not have input delay. Or things like, well, pixel art like look different on those screens. How do we like represent it in a way that like looks nice on these screens and like works in a million resolutions? Right. A lot of that going on, and then just sort of like pinning down exactly what an NES game means is like a big part of the challenge. So like an NES game could be like Donkey Kong Jr., right? That's like really different than Mario 3. Those are just like almost polar opposites to the point where like the cartridge is like in the NES games, like cartridge was like most of the technology, right? So and those cartridges are just like 5 years apart in terms of technology, and that's like that's a huge amount of time and development stuff. So just trying to figure out exactly what the kind of things we were doing and gonna allow in like, how many, is it too weird when we have 5 sprites on screen?
Right.
Is it too weird when we have 6 sprites on screen? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. How did you get to the sort of, because what's happened now is that Shovel Knight came out and then all of these riffs on it came out. Although I'm not sure if that's a fair thing to say either, because they sort of maybe were planned as riffs, but ended up being their own things. Where did but they all share a very common DNA. Like, it feels super consistent between each one and different. It strikes a balance really well. So I guess, where did you come up with the Shovel Knight formula as it is? Like, how far outside of that scope were you playing? Like, was it always like a single screen sort of like combat encounter thing? Was it more combat heavy? Was it less exploration? Did it always have the overworldy stuff? Like, did you hone in on what that sort of core idea was early?
It was really early that we knew essentially that we wanted to make a Mega Man style game. So we wanted to have the structure of a Mega Man game where you're going to 8 villains of some kind, then you're going to like a final villain. We wanted some component of, we knew like going to any stage has problems in terms of like difficulty scaling, right? It either means like they're all too easy or they're all too hard, or you go to one and it's like impossible and you go to one and it's easy. It's like figuring out how to make, you can't really have a nicely graphed experience where like there are dips and valleys and in the difficulty if you can go to anywhere at any time.
Right.
So,
but you did that in Spectre of Torment.
We did that in Spectre Torment. We tried it. I think it was better at that point because we had sort of like introduced, the difficulty of the game was introduced in general, and we could like pull in that in different directions better than we could if it was just like a new IP out of the gate.
Like people knew what to expect from where they were going,
right?
Or what order they knew, should like, be probably doing
and they knew generally like the difficulty of what to expect in stages. So there was a lot more room to play, I think. But yeah, so we tried to do like a little bit of it right. Like in Shovel Knight, you can pick 2 stages at the start and then like 3 stages in the next tier. And then we didn't want to like, in terms of the actual core, like the moment to moment gameplay, we wanted the structure of a Mega Man stage that's sort of like lots of objects, lots of enemies, lots of unique things, really, really strong theming to a stage. Like if you're in the fire stage, you see all fire things, and all the ideas play on like what fire means. While I guess simultaneously we didn't want to make that same kind of loop in Mega Man where you're like shooting and it's a run and gun game, right? So we thought the other big game, the biggest game, I think as a company, we generally try to, like, one of the things we love to do, and I think that makes us maybe unique compared to other companies, is that we take ideas that sort of have been like lost or abandoned or forgotten, or maybe people said this isn't good, or even modern ideas, right? Like that
have like fallen out of fashion
or just aren't cool, or maybe people don't see the full potential of it. And we sort of like to like mash them in and make them and like say, hey, wait, this is actually cool, right? And one of the biggest, when we talk about NES days, the games that people, I think that's the strongest with is Zelda 2.
Okay,
no one likes Zelda 2, right? I mean, except us. But there's so many good elements to that game, and so we were just playing Zelda 2 a lot at that time, and we just thought, well, like I think we could make a lot out of that kind of that combat loop in that game, and like sort of bring in some of the platforming for Mega Man, and we can sort of show people like why it's fun to do a down thrust as like in a combat encounter, why it's fun to like have these like real small but like deliberate encounters with enemies, and that's where a lot of the combat stuff comes in, and like the village and that kind of stuff comes. It's almost direct, like you're on a flat plane the same way you are and talking to villagers, just like Zelda 2. So it was like Zelda and Mega Man were like, I would say, the biggest, like, these are the games we're mashing up. And then, of course, like 1,000 other ideas, like the map is Mario 3 and, over time it's just like injecting all the ideas from all the games we can, and like a Quentin Tarantino movie. And hopefully by the end, like when they're all in there and mashed up, you can't recognize the original thing at all, right?
It'll feel like its own thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it that makes it sound very derivative, but it's also like a very modern feeling game. Like you said, it doesn't feel like it's not limited by those ideas. So were there contemporary games that you were also like pulling?
Yeah. I mean, like obvious one that people use all the time is like Dark Souls, or just MMO, like a corpse run mechanic is like when you die, you drop your bags, right? The biggest things that we were thinking about a lot in terms of bringing these old ideas in is just like what people couldn't handle with those old ideas. So for example, when we went to PAX during the Kickstarter, everyone would come up to us and be like, I love NES games. I love them so much, but please don't make it NES hard. And we're like, what the
Is that a term?
Yeah, apparently.
Wow.
We had no idea what that was, but we were just like in a panic, like what? Like we like, obviously we wanted it to be a challenging game because that's like part of what makes those games really enjoyable. But you know, something about those games also like is a tipping point where it's just it's too hard for people. They like can't get past the first stage, or they can't get to the point where they can enjoy the game because it's too difficult. So how to balance both? We want to make it something that's appealing to everyone, and also we wanted to make it appealing to people that like those old games, right? We want you to feel like when you play Shovel Knight, the next step is that you go like digging through your old NES games, or you like, oh, I probably should like look up Super Mario 3 and try it out because like this game is like, because it's probably just like this game, right? Yeah, so I mean, there's things like the checkpoint system was, you know, there was just during the time we were making the game, a lot of like people trying ideas like Supergiant, for example, where they're doing things where they're like modifying the difficulty in the game. You're not like directly setting easy, normal, and hard, right? And we were thinking a lot about those kind of ideas. It's like, how do we make it so you can play the game and sort of adjust for yourself if you're having problems? So things like the relic system is like in there mainly as like each one of those relics is sort of to solve a problem in the players, like that they might have a fault in.
Right.
So like, oh, if you're bad at platforming, here's the propeller dagger. If you're just like totally scared of combat, here is the phase locket. If you are too scared to be close in an enemy's face, like, and that's what's making it too hard for you, here's the flare wand, so you can stand from afar. All of those were trying to solve a deliberate problem that either we expected people might have or we actually saw when they play tested it.
It's funny hearing you talk about that, because when I went back and played it recently, I was re-engaging with a lot of this stuff, and then I can say it now because by the time this goes up, the embargo will be up. But I played Doom Eternal, and they have a system in it which I think also might be called the Relic system. It's like something similar, or like it might be runes, which effectively does the same thing, where you have a selection of 9 things that they're all just solving issues that a one player could have, and just to make that thing a little bit easier. Which it's such a weird like where do you think this difficulty issue with these old games comes from? Is it just that modern games allow you to, if you're having a problem with A, you can always just go away and do something else? Like open world games, obviously you can do that all the time, but like lots of games offer you alternative ways to do things, and when games don't, in like a boss fight, for example, people just aren't used to it anymore. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot. There are many ways that I think NES games are too hard or different from modern games. One would be just that, like you mentioned, is they were very, very linear, right? And when you get stuck, I think a reason why a Mega Man game is actually more popular back in the day is because you had 8 bosses you could go to. As a child, when I was 5 years old playing Mega Man, I could experience 70% of that game and never get close to beating one stage. Right?
You just pick your
that's what made it enjoyable, though, is like I could see everything and I could play everything. And I think that's true of most modern games too, is most people don't finish games, right? They 30% is like, I think the normal statistics for like how many people beat the game, right?
That must be so depressing for designers. but understandable.
But they probably I still imagine a lot of those people play hundreds of hours maybe of the game. They just never, they either can't progress or they just like play a huge breadth of the content and never get to, doing the completion stuff or whatever. So they get to enjoy it, but not necessarily like go through all of it. So I think that's like a big component. I think NES games are just obtuse a lot of the times, right? I mean, I personally enjoy that. Like when you go into a game and you're like, can I jump in this game? I'm not sure. There's only 2 buttons and I still can't figure it out, right? So that's like a huge part of it. I think it's just not being forgiving or like helping the player wherever you can. Like a example I usually go to in Shovel Knight is like when you die at the same time as the boss, what is the solution, right? And the solution in Shovel Knight is like, we just let you win. But the solution would never be that in an NES game. Not in a million years. In fact, like they would, instead of like 5 hits, they would make it like 2 hits, right? They like try to make it even worse. So yeah, just being generous, I think, is like not a common thing in those games. I feel like I could go. I feel like there's like a million more, but off the top of my head, I can't think of. But yeah, just a lot of So there's a lot of that kind of. There's a lot of ways I think modern games have tried to improve on that and help people. And I think there's also just like the zeitgeist when you play a game is helpful, right?
Yeah.
There's like you've seen a trailer before you play a game and you know what to expect when you play it, which
not just screenshots.
Yeah, I mean that goes a long way. I think coming from Way Forward, we felt that particularly hard because a lot of times the publisher would make a bad trailer and then we would get reviews that would be like 9s and 2s and we'd be like, what's going on? And then you'd watch the review and they just like weren't using the mechanics of the game
because they didn't know about
and them. It's like, I mean, that's like, they didn't know about them. And it's like, it's our fault because we didn't teach the mechanics in the game properly for them to know them. But also like you could tell like it's like obviously these people watch the trailer or like or either they're like the kind of people that could pick up the game naturally, or like these people watched the trailer and thought this was all the game was, and they were like confused by it. It's like watching a going into like see a comedy but the trailer was like a drama and you're like, what? When you go, it's like, why is it so funny? I'm like upset.
It's like that comedy re-edit of The Shining. Was it Shining they called it? Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I guess that expectation management is a large part of it. And having, the playground is now millions of people big. It's not just like your friends you can ask questions about.
Yeah.
Does that change the way you design games? Because there's so much depth in Shovel Knight as well. Like you're riffing off stuff like Mega Man, but like there's so much there. There's so many unique objects. There's so many different ways of attacking the different mobs that are in the game, the different enemies, the different bosses. Even in 2013, it felt like it was maybe on the start of that whole thing, because now we take it for granted with things like Bloodborne and Sekiro that there's a different play experience that first 2 weeks or that first month than there is like a year later, right, when everyone's learned everything.
Oh yeah, right.
Was that the case in 2013? Were you trying to create that depth, or did it just come naturally because of the type of game that you were creating? It felt like there was a lot of different stuff you could put a lot of depth into.
We definitely try to do that, and that was a big concern about the game is like it's easier to, I think it comes more naturally to provide that depth when the game is complex. So like for example, like what we thought about a lot at the time is like games where they use every button on the controller, right? So in GTA, not that there's anything wrong with this and it's cool, but like when I go into a car and I go into a helicopter and I go into a jet ski, they all control differently and they have like different tricks to them, and it's like complicated to get your hands around all those different things. But once you do, there's like so much there to like play around with. And in our game, it's like you can down thrust and you can attack forward, and that's it. So like it's like, okay, one stage is fun, but how do you get like 12, 13 stages out of that like or that depth, or like or in other cases, like we were trying to hide secrets and like play on that and have that be a fun component of the exploration. Being, Mega Man doesn't really have that, right? But Zelda does, and we were trying to like mash that in there. And it's like, okay, you can go on the top of the screen like Mario, and you can knock something out, like a wall, like in Dark Souls or whatever, and you can jump over this area that you thought maybe you couldn't jump into, and then like that's like 3 secrets. We got to think of like 50 more ideas, right? Like there's like, how many types of things can you even have in a game where you only have 2 mechanics to go off of?
But you weren't interested in just repeating a lot of those things over and over
that's
again?
That's what was special about those games, I think, is that they were like trying so hard that I think they didn't feel like for example, in a Mega Man game, you would go like to Mega Man 4 and there would be a gravity flipping mechanic, right? And whole games have been built off that, like VVVVV, right? Is like the whole game is exactly this Mega Man gravity flipping mechanic from Mega Man 4, but Mega Man 4 uses it in 2 places, right? But that's like what makes that game so wonderful and spectacular, is that they show you an idea, they show you like, they teach it to you, they show you like the best version of that idea, or a best version, and then it's over, and then you get to see something new. It's like going to like a theme park or something, where you like get to try all the rides, and it's just such a blast. And we really were focusing on like trying to capture that kind of magic. It's like we wanted like every square inch of the game to feel really like special and new and exciting and different. And that was like a sort of a lot that when we were thinking about like what's cool about those NES games that's different than the modern era, and like what's the things we want to remind people about, like why they're exciting. That was like one of the big ones. Right. It's like when you play like a Skyrim or a Breath of the Wild, even, it's like a million miles before you run into gameplay. And like, I mean, it's cool. It's like, it's a different experience. And we wanted to be like, well, what if that gameplay was like 1 inch away, right? What if like you like couldn't move without there being gameplay in your face?
I feel like I understand what happened then with the subsequent chapters, being that like, I think everyone expected Plague of Shadows to be a sort of, taking the I guess what became Shovel of Hope, taking that template and putting in a different character, but then not only does this character control like a totally different game, but also then every level is different, every encounter, like it's echoing, like you'll always see that fucking bubble dragon, right? Does that have a name? Probably Shovel Knight fans are probably shouting at me now, saying like,
I'm forgetting what his name is. I'm sorry.
Just say bubble dragon. Sorry.
They're shouting at me too.
Fire bubble dragon. Was that just why go to that length? Like, I mean, especially considering like I think the most fascinating part about a lot of this for people who don't know is that like all of this stuff was free updates. It wasn't like you weren't financially incentivized to make a sequel to these games. You were probably disincentivized.
Quite the opposite. Yeah.
So why the impetus to like make it such a unique a version of the game with the expansions or with the chapters or whatever we're calling it?
Yeah. So the initial idea for doing updates in general was the biggest indie game in 2013 was Minecraft.
Okay.
And so, I mean, this is like bizarre, but we thought, well, the way you're successful now is you make a game and you add stuff to it. Yeah. And so we should do some version of that, whatever that looks like. And originally we were thinking, it's not going to be this like grand, we're not adding games. We're going to be adding like
chapters or
like in a Castlevania where you play as another character and you're going through exactly the same stuff. And there's like dialogue changes, or in a Mega Man Powered Up, same idea. You're playing as the other bosses. You're going through exactly the same stages. It's just like a nice addition for someone who's gone through the original game, once or twice.
Yeah.
And as the game was successful, we thought, well, we have an opportunity. We could make something that's much more exciting than that. And when we started thinking about, we started with Plague of Shadows first, and when we started doing it, I think we just got like overly excited and over ambitious, and like you're saying, it's like that. It's our natural instinct to sort of like go that direction based on like what we were making. We just wanted everything to be new and fresh and exciting in some way. And with Plague of Shadows, we like tried to restrain that. We were like, we can't do this for everything. We're gonna make this be more like the Majora's Mask kind of thing. We're going to make it like everything's reused, but like you see it in new ways, and the player's like different and has different mechanics and goes through a different story, and it has a different, like the mood of the game is going to be way different. But we're not going to like go crazy and build every stage over again. And then from there, people played that and they're like, well, it would have been cool if we had different stages. And we're like, yeah, it would have been cool if we had different stages. And
like you almost went too far. You showed them.
Yes, we showed them what it could be.
It could have been, yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean, we agreed. So we did for the other two and Showdown. We were just like, well, we're on this path. We should make them be new games, and we should just like own up to the fact that that's what we're doing, and trying to do that while also being consistent with the other stuff was like a big concern. Like it's like, well, the Bubble Dragon just can't not show up because like that's if you played Shovel Knight and played Plague of Shadows, you would expect him to be there,
right? You set the expectation.
Like you need to see all the 8 nights again.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's like ways we can like push and pull at that and do. And bring in new ideas and like leave some like what we would say is like this idea is on cooldown. Like you'll see Baz in this game, all he'll say is like a dialogue line or two, but in the next game he'll be like a huge boss encounter, which we've like will rework. So yeah, that's generally how it came about, I guess.
That's awesome. We've Plague of Shadows was kind of maybe a bit closer to that, but then when you went on to make the other two, which were done in tandem, right, or like somewhat.
So yeah, King of Cards and Spectre of Torment were done in tandem somewhat, and then like maybe 6 months or 3 to 6 months into it, we just realized these are going to be too different.
Okay. Like you were trying to sort of...
We were trying to do somewhat like a Shovel Knight and Plague of Shadows idea where you'd play through the same stages with like differences.
Okay.
Like the same layouts with differences. And
so in the same way they kind of echoed each other, these two
would echo each other. And when we were just iterating on the mechanics and seeing what was exciting about them, we just it was clear that like they having them have the same stages just wouldn't be as exciting.
Right. They were kind of moving in different directions.
And on top of that, like making them both at the same time was just like we were pulling our hair out. Right. It's like today we're talking about King Knight's mobility and we're talking about Spectre Knight's mobility, and it's just like I can't keep these straight. Who's doing what now? So we sort of did those in tandem, but then we moved, and then we just went straight to doing Spectre of Torment, and then when we went to King of Cards, we actually did successfully somewhat to King of Cards and Showdown in tandem.
Right.
It was more like we were bouncing back and forth depending on like, oh, I don't have anything to animate on King of Cards right now, I'm going to animate Showdown characters, that kind of stuff.
Was the more bite-sized nature of King of Cards, did that help at all?
That helped. I would say the bite-sized nature of both the games really helped a lot. So it's like I could work on one playable character in Showdown. And then once I feel like I've done too much Showdown stuff, I can go and work on, this boss in King of Cards. And it's like really separated out in a good way that we could like balance the
more digestible or something.
Yeah. And they were like enough of a departure. I think that helped too. It wasn't that same confusion where it's like, I can't keep the mobility straight of these two characters, or like what is good in the stage or not, or like what the story is. That like they felt like much more clearly different ideas. It's like, well, this has 4 players, so I'm like thinking about 4 players all the time.
We've talked about them all. So for people who haven't actually played any of these, or maybe you've played 1 or 2 of them, can you give the elevator pitch for each of the each of the 5 games? Yeah, sure. So Shovel Up was the first one. It's like we've been saying, it's riffing on a lot of NES games. But if just a basic picture in your mind, it's just a 2D platformer with some combat, and the next game was Plague of Shadows, which I would say is
similar in that fashion. You play through all the same stages. Sort of like I was saying, like a Majora's Mask. It's a prequel, or it's a prequel's the wrong word. It takes place during the same time, so that's sort of a fun part of it, and it's a much more like inventive and wild mobility set. So if you go into that one, it's like
don't play that first.
We were trying, don't play that first. It was like we were trying to do those NES things where it was like, how do I actually move around in this game, and try to do that in a fun way. And it's got like crafting and like putting together like bombs that you throw. So it's like a little more like you're like planning your like loadout compared to Shovel Knight, which is like real simple in terms of the upgrades and items and stuff. And then Spectre of Torment is a prequel, and where you play as Spectre Knight, and I would say the main motivation for that game was like, we wanted to make it easy to look cool.
Okay.
So if you want to look cool in your video game, that's a good way to do it. So
that's the one that I felt like I was like in control from the start more than any of them. That I felt like I was a badass, like I'm fucking destroying all.
Yeah. And that one was like it's a similarly a 2D game, but it was more inspired by 3D mechanics actually. So like Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, wall climbing, and the dash slash, which is the main mechanic in that game, which is when you're near an object or enemy, you'll just you can like home in on that enemy and fly across the screen. That was taken that was inspired by Ninja Gaiden Black's Flying Swallow.
Yeah, I never put two and two together there. Yeah, totally. Okay.
But if you can't picture that, it's like you might be reminded about like Sonic's homing kind of stuff too, where you launch into enemies and like either bounce off them or cut through them. And then King of Cards, which is the most recent one, where you play as King Knight, is more along the style of like a Wario Mario game, where you're like bashing into things and then you like get on. It's sort of a combination of like sort of everything we've done before, where you're like the Shovel Knight game, you're like down thrusting and bouncing off guys a lot. In this game, you bash into them and then you like bounce off them. So it's like a 1-2 punch version of Shovel Knight's idea. And the stages, so in all the games that I had been talking about, they're all like these big meaty stages. And in King of Cards, we tried to do the Mario World idea with a real short, you get in and get out, and
it's like 2 checkpoints instead of 5 or 6.
Yeah, right. And there's 30 of them as opposed to 10 of them. And then there's also this component of having a card game in it, which was just like a Goonie idea we wanted to do, which is more of a
Gwent fans in the studio,
we were the big idea we were trying to we were inspired by is that there were a lot of obviously Hearthstone inspired a lot of like Magic style CCG, like really crazy like knowledge based card games, and we were really thinking about how cool like Triple Triad was from Final Fantasy VIII, just like really small, not many rules, and just like building out from there. And then the final game, which so these both King of Cards and Showdown both came out in December, which is Shovel Knight Showdown, and that is a 4-player like platforming fighting game.
Yeah, that wasn't a Kickstarter.
That was part of the Kickstarter.
Oh, it was as well.
Yes, yeah.
Jeez. in a world where so many Kickstarter promises don't come together.
I'm pretty sure we're the only people that have ever delivered on our Kickstarter promises.
So I mean, as part of this, you make 5 games over the course of 6 to 7 years. Presumably a big component of this was the fact that you weren't just running off this 350,000. It kept selling, right? Like you kept releasing it on platforms.
Luckily, I don't think we'd be where we are if it didn't sell. I mean, the original game did amazing. I think we're at something like 2.5 million copies sold now, and we're on our second retail run of the game, and we have Amiibo, and it's been crazy how swccessful it's been.
There was such a big push, it seemed, or a lot of people talking around the launch of the Switch, of course, because you were a launch title on Switch. Fair play. Was that the strategy to be like, look, if we're on there early, or was it oh, we get to be, was that the first Nintendo platform you were on?
No, we were on 3DS and Wii.
You were, okay.
Yeah.
Oh God, of course. God,
Yeah.
2013.
Yeah.
We're so old.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So was it just like, oh, we really want to be on this? Did Nintendo approach you about it? Presumably, if it was a launch
I'm not
title?
sure the order of the events that happened. I think obviously we wanted to be, I think everyone wants to be on a platform at launch.
Yeah.
That's like the most amazing thing you can do. I think I think they were just showing us, early versions of it, and we're like, well, when's it coming out? We could like line something up here, maybe. So we definitely for Spectre Torment, we made a big push to get it out on time.
From a technical perspective, was it a difficult port to do or a difficult transition to get it onto the Switch?
It was. The most difficult part of it is that we used Fmod for sound stuff, and we used an old version of Fmod because we're so behind. And they weren't going to support the Switch. Okay. So we had to like basically rewrite our sound engine to work on Switch. But besides that, it was nothing too crazy. The biggest worry actually was, since it was a new system and since it was like sort of like a Nintendo system, typically they have features that no one's done before. We just didn't know how people would use it. So we had co-op, for example, right? Yeah. And we're like, how do you even set up the two controllers when you play that? They had that like they had the menu. We knew from the kit that they had the menu that was like, you go into the home menu and you press this button and you can set up two controllers to be however you want. But we didn't know like, how is a Nintendo game going to work? Because like, if we don't do it exactly like a Nintendo game does it, we're going to look weird.
Of course, yeah.
And everyone's going to judge us. And
if every other game does it this way, then right here,
and
strange.
We can't see any games that anyone is doing.
They wouldn't like.
Yeah, they can't tell us. They can't show us. So we just had to make guesses and hope that we're like doing the right thing, right?
Did you think that people would? Did you have a bias towards people playing mobile or at home? Like, or did you just kind of like not know how that was going to go?
We didn't really have a bias. I mean, that was obviously one of the cool things about it, is that we knew, like, we had made the Wii U and 3DS version, so we knew like it worked in both kind of places. So yeah, but we just didn't know what people would expect in terms of like how to use the system, and so. That was a fun part of like, oh God, we're like, I hope it works out. And there's things like, for example, like the HD Rumble. We tried it out and we weren't like happy with how it worked in Shovel Knight. And we were just like, we're not going to support it. Is everyone going to kill us for that? Right. Yeah.
It wasn't like it wasn't mandatory on their end.
No.
They're okay about it.
Yeah.
More battery life than if you're playing Shovel Knight.
I know, that
works out.
Yeah.
I've been asking you questions this whole time, but of course we've got questions in from our Discord as well. You can send in your emails, podcast@noclip.video. If you're a part of our community on Patreon, that's patreon.com/noclip. You can join our Discord, and we have a podcast questions channel. Folks have been sticking in questions all morning, so I'm going to grab a couple of these. Germanas asks, why shovel? I heard you mention Minecraft. Were you just like, shovel? Kids fucking love shovels, man. Love digging.
So the real reason is, although that was like a nice plus, it's funny actually. Like, we went to the first Minecraft convention. They brought us there.
You went to Minecon?
Yeah, Minecon.
Where was the first one? I went to one in Paris.
I forget where it was. I didn't personally go. It was, I think so. I wanted to say it was like
LA or something, probably.
No, like Atlanta or something.
Okay, like E3.
I can't remember.
Where all the best conferences start.
But yeah, we went there and everyone was like, "Oh, this is like cool. It looks just like Minecraft." And we're like, "What are you talking about?"
Oh, you actually showed it there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. There's no backlash. People weren't saying you're jumping on the shovel train.
Yeah, right. But so the shovel came from. We knew we were talking about the mechanics of being a down thrust and attacking, and initially we were thinking about it being like a 1-2 punch where it's like the best thing would be like if you saw a beetle and you flipped it over to expose its underbelly and then you stabbed it.
Attack its weak point for massive damage.
Weak point, yes. But we were like, you can't do that. You can't flip something over with a sword. That's weird. Like, It can't be that. And then so it was like, well, I think like a shovel would work. Like you scoop it up and then you dig into them or whatever. So that's basically where it came from. And then slapping the knight on it was just like, we were already talking about being a medieval thing doing knights, and it just was like,
Multiple
Shovel
knights.
Knight, that's like way too funny. Yeah.
Excellent. Vincent asked a question. What's your favorite song from the Shovel Knight soundtrack, and how much input did you have in the music, or did you let the music composer run free?
Jake just goes and is crazy wild with we just say like, here's the game, and he delivers the soundtrack. We have total trust there, and he never redoes any song or anything like that.
Lots of really satisfying remixes though. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
oh yeah. But we what was it again? Oh, the other Minami Matsumai, who wrote the music for the original Mega Man, did 2 songs on the soundtrack too. And we did give her like a big, it's like, here's what we're thinking, here's what it is, like here's the kind of things we're trying to do.
You don't want to waste her time either.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Jake we have like a mind meld with, I think. So yeah, we weren't quite there with Minami yet. Maybe we are now. But my favorite song,
anyone's that jump out? The soundtrack, there are multiple soundtracks available, right?
Yeah, they're all, you can get the soundtrack for every game for free or with a donation on Jake's website on Bandcamp. So it's pretty amazing.
There's vinyls out too, right?
There you can buy vinyls. I think we maybe sell CDs still, and you can get it on iTunes or Spotify.
CDs,
and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Are CDs the next one? Because like I've a bunch of video game vinyls.
Oh
I'm a
right,
big fan of it. But
like in 10 years, are they going to get like, you're going to put CDs?
They're like, yeah, it sounds rich on vinyl, but
it's like, has that like, it's not quite perfect quality, but it's like just straight. It's like getting close.
You get like remember we used to get music videos on CD singles. Like maybe I'll start putting gameplay clips on the CDs. Yeah. Invest early in CDs.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if I can think of a favorite song. I really like just the dream sequence song a lot. I really like the ending song in Plague of Shadows, where they're dancing. Sorry for spoilers if you, but that might not.
There's dancing.
Maybe not enough information. I really like that. There's just so many good songs. I currently have I just can't get it out of my head, even though we've been playing it for a year and I haven't touched the game for like 3 months. But the showdown, like the showdown stage theme for the Coliseum is right. It's just like in my brain every morning still, and I can't get rid of it. But I love that song a lot. Awesome.
Last question I'll pull from here is from Fatui. He says, what made you decide to add stories to the villains in the game, in the expansions, in the DLC? Do you think is that just an extension of we're going to add all these new mechanics so we can't just use the same story? Like, you had established stories, so you just needed to make sure there's another story.
I mean, there's a couple components. One is that one of the things we liked about Mega Man was all these themed characters, or like Mario, right? It's like all these like really iconic visual designs, but they didn't have like, you could like and try to insert a lot of personality onto them, but they didn't really like provide that for you. Right. And I think that's like what modern games obviously do a lot better.
But in the old days, almost sometimes culture sort of applied stories to them.
Yeah.
And sometimes like Mortal Kombat characters in sequels ended up actually adopting some of the lies that we had told the developers. Yeah. So when we were thinking about making those bosses, that was a big part of it. Like a good example is like Plague Knight, right? You might make a direct comparison to like Bomb Man and Mega Man. It's like a character that jumps around and throws bombs. It's like it's almost the same fight with like really varied mechanic, obviously, but it's like how do we like, even if he says like 2 lines of dialogue, how do we insert personality there, right? It's like when you show up in the battle, he's like not there, and then he appears like he's like this nervous like hiding person. He's like doesn't want to be seen kind of thing. It's like immediately like what kind of character he is. And I think in part of making the Shovel Knight story, like we really wanted the story to not be in your face, just like in those NES games, but we also wanted to be the kind of thing that like lots of people play games for stories. Another component of difficulty, I think, is that like
you'll put up with a more difficult game if there's like another way you can be satisfied by it, right? It's like, well, it's like if I just get through this part, I'll like have the reward of the Final Fantasy VII, like the FMV sequence, right? And we wanted that to be like a little component of that game, even if it wasn't major, just like something that like to remember the game by. And I think when we were making those the other games too, that was just as important that we do that. Like we developed Plague Knight as this little character and gave him this little personality, and the same way we did it with Shovel Knight, we wanted to do with those characters.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. David, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to film something while you're here as well, some little fun goodness, which will be up on the YouTube channel. For people who are looking to pick up Shovel Knight, are you just pointing people towards Treasure Trove now? That's sort of the way to get it, right?
Yeah, I would recommend Treasure Trove. But if you are scared to try it or whatever, if you don't want to dip your toe all the way into the pool, then we sell all the games separately too, and they're much cheaper. But the Treasure Trove is cheaper than buying them all separately.
Right.
So if you're going to buy one of those, make sure you upgrade to Treasure Trove if you like everything.
Do you sell them all separately on Steam and Epic or any of those things?
Yeah, we sell them all separately on Steam and Switch, and they will be all separate on PS4 hopefully this month.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Any plans for next generation stuff?
I mean, we're thinking about what we're making next as we speak.
Actually, before we go, is that the sense now? Is at least you can all get in the room and kind of plan something a little bit different as well? Or
yeah, I mean, for the last month, we've just been. It's like, hey, what do we want to dedicate the next 18 months plus of our lives to? Hopefully not that again.
And are you happy with the team size as it? Have you guys grown a bit since?
We've grown. So we started as 5 and now we're maybe 15.
Okay, right. Okay, yeah.
And
that feels right.
We're hoping to maybe be like 22 or something like that. We're thinking about potentially making 2 games at once and seeing how that goes.
Well, you've kind of done it already.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. So we want to grow. I don't think we'd get much bigger than that though. I mean, we want to stay small. I think the idea of growing to 20 is hey, then we can have 2 small teams.
Right, of course. Yeah. You'll have 2 11 teams or whatever.
Yeah.
That's awesome. David D'Angelo from Yacht Club Games, thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate it. A little bit of housekeeping before we let you go, because I didn't do that last week with Hugo like a silly boy. A couple of documentaries have hit the channel. We have our Outer Wilds one, of course. Our Transistor doc landed. By the time you watch this, we probably won't have any of the other biggies out. We'll have one on genital jousting, which we filmed at GDC last year, which is one of my favorite interviews, which we finally sort of had enough time to put the tender loving care into that one. Jeremy's working away on the Gish doc. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Gish documentary coming soon. We also have Edmund McMillan's interview we shot around that time as well, talking about his history of games too. And also I went and played Doom yesterday as we're recording this. So we have a video with Hugo Martin will be going up, but also on my channel I have impressions on Doom Eternal because I played about 2 hours of that. So you can go check that out as well. That's it. Thank you so much. Hope you're having a good time wherever you are, playing some video games, and we'll see you next time on the Noclip podcast. Bye.